The WTO is a member-driven organization, but it is also the responsibility of the members to drive the organization.
Only a bold and comprehensive reform agenda can restore the central role of the WTO.
Market orientation is like a beauty contest.
It's a bit of a gorilla in the room, isn't it?
The WTO has played a central role in helping support the strength and stability of the global economy. At the same time, the world is now a very different place than it was in 1995. The ability of members to update and adjust our rules to the changing conditions of trade is ultimately the only way to keep the WTO relevant to our economies and to foster our trade relations.
The world economy has changed a lot over the past 25 years, and the WTO has failed to evolve with it. Only a bold and comprehensive reform agenda can restore the central role of the WTO.
There are many, many extremely important problems to be solved. We have fisheries subsidies negotiations. We have climate change, massive problem, requires huge amounts of collaboration and communication. We have the challenges of the digital economy. We have the fact that we've just had a pandemic. We're in a pandemic, and there are huge challenges associated with the subsidies that governments are handing out and potential for spillovers there.
It's a bit of a gorilla in the room, isn't it? People have talked about, quite rightly, about the existential issues of climate change, fishing subsidies, trade distortion. But if nobody talks about jobs, employment, living standards, distributional equity issues, you're really missing the issue.
What is frustrating is the WTO is paralyzed because it is members driven. And even to begin the discussion, the members must agree to discuss. Under current institutional arrangements, it is difficult to begin a process of reform.
The WTO is a member-driven organization, but it is also the responsibility of the members to drive the organization. You will need to combine multilateral outcomes with others that take the form of open and inclusive plurilateral agreements, where not all 164 members can move forward immediately together at the same time.
The challenges posed by a proliferation of plurilateral initiatives is not only putting pressure on multilateralism, but also being shaped in a way and at a pace that gives developing countries limited space to shape the agenda.
When members opened their economies to competition through the WTO, they did so with a shared understanding that market-oriented conditions would take hold in each of their economies, and this would help ensure a level playing field for the competition to take place. The idea, in other words, was that the WTO would be a place supporting the gradual convergence over time of economic systems, not the coexistence of radically different ones.
With regard to the point that maybe market orientation should be part of the reform agenda, I cannot disagree with that more. Market orientation is like a beauty contest, which has not much to do with the WTO parameters. We do not want to implicate the issue like which economic model is more beautiful than other economic models.
The WTO is not the place to drive systems change. It's not about regime change. This is about dealing with the consequences of certain economic systems and to make sure that these are being dealt with in a manner in which everyone can live with. And that requires a compromise on all sides.
As African countries, we're in the middle of tensions that we see among I would say, the biggest trading powers, but also largest trading partners to our continent and our country, which we believe, sort of puts us aside.
The WTO of the future will deliver fairness with a new social contract for trade, empowering women in trade, spreading the benefits to micro, medium, and small enterprises, providing for workable trade remedies where needed, disciplining industrial subsidies, fostering economic development, particularly for the least developed countries, and creating more opportunities for the young.